Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Part 141 Modernization Introductory meeting. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lauren. I'm one of our live events producers. I'm just going to give you a quick couple of house meeting notes, and then we'll kick it off. Perfect. By default, your cameras are turned off and microphones are muted as attendees. However, we will be taking questions throughout the event. If you could please enter those questions into the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, along the bottom there. Our team will try and address as many as we can during today's event in the time that we have allotted. We'll either be utilizing our Answer Live function, type to answer, or we might, if we don't have time or it's not quite on brand with today's content, we might reply to you in an email later with the emails that you registered with for today's event. Let's see here. I think that's everything from me. So we'll go ahead and kick it over to Mark Steinbecker, that Director, Office of Safety Standards, Flight Standard Service.
All right. Well, hello and good morning. As the slide says, my name is Mark Steinbecker. I serve in Flight Standards Service within the FAA as our Director of Safety Standards Organization. And I'll plan to keep my remarks very brief so we can get to the program quickly. And I'm coming to you from the nation's capital. I apologize for some sounds of the city that you might hear in the background. First up, I want to extend my appreciation for the FAA and industry folks and leaders related to this effort. I know there's been a lot of work up to this point organizing and developing material. So thank you very much. I was looking at this, the content, it seems to me, speaking broadly, that an enduring challenge for training, really of all types in aviation, is to serve as a solid foundation for safe and efficient operations. That's always been so. At the same time, our training frameworks and the trainers, I expect we have many trainers, instructors on the Zoom today. You need to be responsive to changes, just like the framework, resulting from emerging needs, risk, new technologies, and so on. And to me, that's a balance that's not always easily accomplished between being the foundation and also being agile and innovative. So such is the case for our subject today. I will say up front, and I think you'll hear it many times, it is time for an update to Part 141. Actually, it's well past time, and it's important that we do this. So we've been successful with similar updates to other areas related to pilot, and I'll say mechanic, and other areas training. We're confident that the same can be done for 141. And ideally with many good outcomes as we've done in the other areas. So as with the other efforts, I will say FAA doesn't intend to do this alone or in a vacuum. Well, we just can't if we want to be successful. So we need to work together on this, which brings us to the program today. I've looked at the slides, the draft content. The content, I think, will explain very well in more detail what's being proposed for the 141 initiative and what the future might entail. And so I'll close by saying, once again, thank you. I want to thank all of the participants today, everyone joining the program today, for your participation. I hope all find the program today both productive and worthwhile. And with that, I think I'll toss it back to Lauren. Thanks for your support, and Everett Rochon, who will be leading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Of course, Mark, before he departs, I just kind of want to thank him for his personal support and the executive leadership support through AVS and up to the acting administrator, because it's been critical to arriving here and kicking off this modernization effort today. So thank you, Mark. Appreciate that very much. So here we are. I tell you, this day has arrived, and many of you, I've been sharing for many months the desire to kick off this effort, and so here we are. So good day, everyone. On behalf of Trey McClure, who's the acting manager of the General Aviation and Commercial Division, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. I know it wasn't easy. You probably had to juggle schedules and other conflicts that you had going on, but your effort is much appreciated. So to just level set a little bit, again, I'm Everett Rochon, the manager of the training and certification group, and our group has responsibility from an FAA regulatory and policy perspective for the airman training and certification system, as we say. So, which of course includes Part 141 pilot schools. So before we introduce you to the rest of the team and get into the details about what this modernization effort is, I'll explain a little bit about what it's not. So it's not an aviation rulemaking advisory committee, nor is it an aviation rulemaking committee. But what we are starting is a series of FAA industry public meetings, which borrows some of the aspects of those committees, the ARAC and the ARC, but it's more flexible because it's not bound by those statutory requirements. So you may be generally familiar with the FAA rulemaking process, which broadly speaking kind of starts with a notice of proposed rulemaking or an NPRM, and then there's a public comment period, and then publication of a final rule. So understandably, that process at times can be frustrating for us and for industry, unable to continually engage during that process because of ex parte reasons. So we hope to alleviate a lot of that frustration with this effort. So this has rarely, if ever, been tried before, as far as I've been able to tell. But this is your opportunity as industry, as stakeholders in pilot training, to provide thorough and detailed recommendations for what could end in a generational opportunity to modernize pilot schools. So the FAA doesn't intend to influence a particular outcome or direction other than to assure the end product assists with rulemaking and or policy improvements if that is indeed the next step. I want to emphasize that this is a collaborative effort between the FAA and you all, but the FAA is primarily going to be in a listening mode with broad interest to assure safety, efficiency, and effectiveness of pilot training and pilot schools. And you're going to hear those words over and over again, which is efficiency and effectiveness. And I think those things, those key words are important because I think in the environment that we're in right now, it's not just about rulemaking. It's about smart rulemaking. It's about rulemaking that leads to not just coverage of that safety umbrella, but the efficiency and effectiveness that I just mentioned. If we, through this process, determine that there's policy areas for improvements and we can identify those, then we plan to make those changes in the near term and not wait till the end of this program, this process that we're starting. But finally, I want to say that we can't do this without your expertise, without your perspectives, and we can't do this without an industry facilitator and coordinator. So Lee, over to you for you and your team's introductions.
Thank you very much, Everett. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you happen to be on the continent. We want to welcome you here this morning. I'd like to echo Mark's comments and that of Everett's in terms of our extreme pleasure that everyone has taken the time to be here and be a part of this. This is, in many, many ways, an unprecedented event and an unprecedented effort on behalf of the FAA and industry to effect change. Many of you have probably in the past in your careers participated in ARCs and other task forces, working groups, and the like, and you know how that process generally works. This will have some components of that, but much more different in that, as Everett just mentioned, we won't have a lot of the constraints of ex parte and other legal and regulatory language that would keep us from being able to move forward. Also, I think what is helpful, we live in a time now where with the new administration in Washington, D.C., there is a strong emphasis on deregulating and streamlining. not adding undue burden to industry or business or progress. So in that regard, this particular effort may fit very, very well. One of the themes that has been constant from senior FAA leadership since this process began back last summer was that we want to look at where regulation impedes efficiency and where policy prohibits innovation, or it at least squanders the opportunity to at least look at and embrace innovation. So that is something that I think overall, from a 50,000-foot level, should produce some new and interesting ideas about how we can train pilots in a better, more streamlined way in this country and this industry, right? We are here because, as Mark aptly said, it is long past time for 141 to be offered some new way forward, a new framework and a new ethos, an understanding that although there may have been changes and edits made over the years, that by and large, what we have now as a regulatory scheme is more than 40 years old in its thinking, in what it could envision, about some of the areas we think we can look at and that many of you all have already expressed interest in. Over the last 4 months, there has been a tremendous amount of conversation between myself, members of our team, and those of you out there who want to be a part of this. And that those conversations have been extremely fruitful, very, very positive, and interesting to note that most people are of the same accord as to where they think we can move a regulatory framework that provides for better student outcomes. I mean, isn't that what we really are doing this for? We want to provide for better student outcomes, to produce the best pilots in the world, wherever possible, reducing costs as a barrier to entry. And now in this new age of technology and virtual reality and artificial intelligence and the like, to be able to embrace technology wherever possible and feasible to improve throughput, to improve efficiency, and to improve overall the ability of this industry to act in one accord with its regulators on a very nimble basis to improve training. And at the end of the day, what the FAA is most concerned with, and all of us in aviation, is improving safety standards, correct? I mean, we want to know that from the general aviation level on up, we have an opportunity to train better, to fly more safely, and to improve those statistics that we work every year to improve. Remember, those of you who are in our industry or even tangentially related to this industry, we are the gateway to aviation. We are literally the front door. So what we do at the beginning affects everything that comes after it. And while at the end of the pipeline in our 121 carriers and even those who are operating under 135, they have developed some efficiencies and some ways of doing business over the years that have proven to be very, very successful. We now get an opportunity potentially to reverse engineer into the same types of data-driven approaches to training and the ability to embrace new and better ways of oversight and compliance that have already been proven successful in other places. How did we get here? Well, we all came through the FAA reauthorization bill over the last few years, and we were now nearly a year into the period since that signing. So we're now in the implementation phase. Our organization was founded in 2022 on the front end of that effort, and we began working very, very quickly on Capitol Hill with not only legislators and staff members, but other organizations such as yours collaboratively to make sure that we harmonized our efforts to move the needle and improve training potentialities. And I think we did a very, very, very good job. That bill contained an awful lot that was good, not just for training, but for general aviation across the board. Many of you, like us, said over and over, both to FAA representatives and those on Capitol Hill, that our regulatory framework prohibits us from being as good as we can be. Again, more about that later in our presentation, but just keep in mind that we are all here today because of the combined efforts of so many organizations along with us over the last 2 to 3 years. If I can get the next slide, please. One more comment. People will say, well, why NFTA? You guys are kind of the new kids on the block. And in terms of an association, that's very, very true. But when you look at our executive committee, our board of directors, and other people on our leadership team, we have over 150 years of combined aviation experience. All but one of those individuals have not only owned flight schools, but run successful flight training operations at both the Part 61, 141, 135, and even 121 levels. Our leadership includes past FAA senior executives and others. And we have but one agenda. And I think most of you get this because those of you who have worked with us have seen it in practice. But our single agenda, our reason to be, is that we want to create the big tent, the atmosphere where everyone in aviation training or even related to aviation training can come together and work collaboratively to determine a vision and a future forward for the industry that makes sense and that will protect our overriding goal to produce the best pilots in the world using the best methods and improving those student outcomes. So if you look at this piece right here on this slide, which is clipped from our website, it says right there what our agenda is. We are working to unify, to promote, and protect the America's flight training providers so that they can meet the mandates of both industry and Congress in this nation. Later on, we'll have an opportunity for questions, but at this point, I want to conclude my comments and flip it on over to my colleagues here to continue.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Klingler. I have the pleasure of being the training section manager in our General Aviation Commercial Division. I wanted to introduce our team and give you a little bit of background on the industry experience they have and the FAA experience they have to give you a better understanding of where this team's coming from and how their efforts have led to this day. Industry experience combined, they have 13,300 plus hours of flight instruction. 36 years of that has been instructing under 141, 30 years of experience of instructing in Part 61. We have multiple chief and assistant chief instructors in our team. We have an airport owner. We have one that was a DPE and one that started a Part 141 collegiate flight program. So our industry experience is extensive. And then the FAA experience, as they came on board, we have over 74 years of experience, 31 years of principal operations inspector experience. We have ATP, commercial lighter than air balloon rating, seaplane rated, initial airplane flight instructor, multi-engine flight instructor, instrument airplane flight instructor, ground instructors, and remote pilots, and AMRIN certifications as aviation safety inspectors. One even has a Wright Brothers Award recipient, which is, for those that do not know, is 50 years plus of experience in the industry and as a pilot. And then they all have extensive spin and upset recovery training. I'm just giving you this snapshot to give you a little bit under this group of great people have been working for over a year on this effort are your go team. They are the team you're going to be working with for the next year in the public meetings. And so they bring the experience that your team has too. And so I hope you see that throughout this process. And again, thank you for coming and being part of this new way of doing things. And then over to Lindsay.
Good morning. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm very excited to be here. Obviously, I know some people have asked. We have over 347 participants. Brandon, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm here today to kind of provide you the roadmap of where we're at, or how we got here, and also where we're going in the future with this project. So I'll start with a little bit of a history of Part 141, give you a little history lesson, because who doesn't like history first thing in the morning, especially on regulations? And then I'll take us into why we ended up into this modernization effort. We will touch on how these public meetings will kind of the structure of them a little bit, how we announce it through the federal registers, and how that's connected to our website, and how we provide information to you about the project. Then I will turn it over to the industry leads again for just a short bit, and then I'll come back to me and I'll talk to you about the actual schedule of the meeting, and we'll have a little bit of information on how our federal docket will work as well. So let's go into that little bit of a background. And pretty much, I'm sure most of you here, I saw a lot of names I even remember. Sorry, a lot of names that I knew. So I know a lot of you are from the flight training industry. But Part 141 compared to Part 61, we all know is equivalent levels of aeronautical experience. The experience is the same. You do have an opportunity to do it in few hours. So like, for example, the private pilot for airplanes specifically, it's 35 hours under Part 141 versus Part 61 is 40 hours. And obviously similar things occur under instrument or commercial and so on. We also, under Part 141, FAA oversight is provided. Usually, most of you all know your friendly FSDOs, and they provide that oversight of not only the curricula, the personnel, the aircraft, the facilities. So a lot of you may be already familiar with that structure, but just a quick high-level overview of 141 for those that may or may not be as familiar. What was interesting when we started researching this project is, and maybe some of you are aware, but I'm a history buff myself, is we looked at it and we're like, wow, flight schools actually have been around for, obviously it makes sense. You've had the Wright brothers starting in 1903. Flight schools came into fruition quite quickly, would make sense. But it wasn't until 1926 when the Air Commerce Act came into play that they established flying school regulations in 1929. So it's almost coming up 100 years that pilot schools have really been certificated. It wasn't until the CAA came into play in about 1940, Car Part 50, that came around. Which, another interesting little fact is, if you go actually find Car Part 50, which you can actually go find it on the internet, is a lot of that regulatory language that you see in Car Part 50 is still in use today. So for example, back in 1940, the private pilot certificate was 35 hours. Interestingly enough, it's still that today. There may have been a few changes since then, but again, if you look at a lot of that regulatory structure, it's still in Part 141 today. So we have a lot of foundational ties to Car Part 50. In about the 1970s, the FAA became, actually I should say this again, the Code of Federal the Code of Federal Regulations, there we go, I can speak, came into play, and that's when 141 itself was established. We really didn't see any major revisions to Part 141 until 1997, so about 28 years ago. And if you can imagine some of you may not even be old enough to know what was happening in 1997, but in 1997, you can imagine at least the technology. GPS was coming into play, but TA, or technically advanced aircraft, were definitely not available at the time. And the electronic flight bags weren't available. Simulation is definitely improved since 1997, and virtual classrooms, especially like what we're doing today, this didn't exist back then. So, you know, all of these things, the older language, the not that we haven't had a holistic look at 141 in years. The technology, we know that even in learning techniques, those have all changed in the last 100 years. So we really want that holistic look, and we need to be adaptive to the current needs of what the industry needs and the future needs of flight training. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about where we're at current state with 141. Currently, there's about 500, and I pulled this data as of a couple days ago. So there's about 509 certificated pilot schools, so under Part 141. There are only 74 of those that hold examining authority, at least for one course, which equates out to about 14%. We realize that that is underutilized. So if you look at the data down below, and this is only for private pilot certification, it is, and it's in a 10-year period starting from the right side of the screen, which is 2013, to the left side of the screen, which is 2023. The first thing you're obviously going to notice is that there's an increase in demand for pilot certification. And then the next thing you're going to notice is the little bar graphs. Each color represents a different thing. So in this case, the blue represents how much certification for private pilots Part 61 is conducting. The orange is representing, and if you were to take this data straight from an 8710, you would notice that the middle section where pilot schools sign that they've associated that curriculum, that is your orange in the middle. So this is how much Part 141 is signing off for the private pilots. And the gray is your examining authority. So this is how many end of course tests are equivalent to the private pilot practical tests that are all being done. So this kind of just shows you that approximately 77% of the private pilot training is done outside of Part 141. And we also can see that examining authority is also underutilized as well. So all of these things are just kind of pointing us towards the fact that we need modernization. The objective of this project is to advance Part 141 into the 21st century of not just today, but beyond, serving the needs of the flight training industry as well. So that's our big premise. So how are we going to do this? We need your help. That's the first key item of this, is we need the flight training industry support. We need you, because yes, we have a lot of experience, but we need your external experience as well. Obviously, we may not have every single niche that needs to be addressed. So that's why you are here today. The main element that always has to come up with anything in aviation is safety. Safety is always going to be our foundation, and we need to make sure that whatever we do, we want to encompass and make sure we take care of safety, which I'll reiterate again here in another slide. And as promised, you're going to hear those words: efficiency, innovation, and technology. We want to make sure 141 works and is efficient for obviously not only us as internal, but for you externally. We want to make sure innovation is in there. We want to make sure technology is included. So we're going to glean Part 141 from a lot of things that maybe Powered Lift, the rulemaking from Powered Lift, and also from Mosaic. Those two have really encapsulated all these efficiencies and innovation and technology. We would like to emulate that as well. As you can see here, again, this is that same 10-year period from 2013 to 2023. This is the number of GA fatal accidents, or general aviation fatal accidents. You can see there's been about 2,200 on the general aviation fatal accidents. And the second leading category of GA accidents is instructional flights. And we did actually go through those and purge them for anything else that might not, like for example, air carrier instruction. We did go through and make sure that it was clean for that. But what we can say here is this is our foundation of safety, right? We want to make sure everybody comes home as much as we can. There's always been that goal to drive down general aviation accidents. And we also understand that pilot training is the foundation of the aviation industry as a whole. So could we, by updating and providing all these efficiencies and using technologies to also drive down accidents and prevent somebody else from not coming home? Can we influence how even that goes into the air carrier world? Those are some things that we want to take in consideration throughout this whole entire project. So how are we going to do this? We're going to do it through public meetings. As mentioned by Everett, is that the main goal of this is it's open to the public. It is open to everybody. So everybody can come, everybody's voices can be heard. There will be a series of 8 meetings. They're going to be a combination of in-person and virtual. So the in-person ones will be hybrid, so at the same time. So even if you can't attend in person, you will also be able to attend virtually. The 4 locations, and I'll go into more detail about about the locations and what we're going to be covering later, but the 4 locations, the first one will be Atlanta, Georgia. The next one will be Burlington, which is actually Burlington, Massachusetts. It's near Boston. And all of these are FAA regional offices, what they are. And then there'll be Dallas, Fort Worth. And our last meeting will be in El Segundo or LA. And as mentioned before, NFTA is our industry lead helping us through this process as well, because there's a lot of work that we can't do on our own. So what are we asking of you, of the industry? We're asking you to represent the industry segment. We want your knowledge. We want your expertise. We recognize that we cannot do this alone. We want you to go back to your organization, even if maybe you're the only one coming from your university, flight school, maybe you represent simulators, whatever it happens to be. We want you to go back to your organizations and figure out as a group what your organization can bring to us. We want you to contribute. At the end, there's going to be the development of recommendations. We want your contribution. We want you to provide data. If you have data that can help us make recommendations, great. That is what we're looking for throughout this whole process. So what is our roles as FAA and industry lead? So we are there to provide the framework. We are there to provide the background material and what we're going to be doing. We are to make sure that things stay in scope of pilot's goals. We cannot go out and influence Part 91. We're not out there to do pilot, flying rules. We're not out there to influence air carrier rules at this point. We do have to stay within the scope of Part 141. At the end of this project, we are asking for a recommendations report, and it's going to address tasks, and I will explain those taskings here shortly. But we're not only going to document the majority of the positions, but we're also going to document the dissenting. So we get both sides of the story. All voices want to be heard, and we want them to be heard. So how are you going to know about all these meetings? First of all, we use the Federal Register. The Federal Register is our way of it's basically the invitation to the public. That is how you are invited. That way, everybody is invited, nobody is excluded. So from the Federal Register, we point to our website, and vice versa. Our website will always point back to the Federal Register. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see the QR code, or there's the website down below. And if somebody on the team would like to drop the website in the chat, just so everybody has that as well, that would be great. And I'll go into some of the details of things that you can find on our website as we go throughout the day. But those are the two main things. Keep in mind, the website is, if we for some reason have any changes, that is our direct way of communicating with you. The Federal Register is a little bit harder to change, so you're going to notice that the Federal Register is a little bit more generic, but the website will have the detailed information. Thank you, Lauren. On our website, if you scroll down into under the resources, what you're going to find is, you saw this earlier as Everett showed, is the letter from Trey, who is our acting manager for the General Aviation Commercial Division, showing our support for it from a leadership standpoint. Within it, it also identifies NFTA as our industry lead. And along with that letter, you're going to see this next side of the documentation, which is going to list our objectives and tasking. So we do have a framework. And if you've ever attended an ARC or an aviation rulemaking committee, you are going to see a lot of this tasking and objectives looks very similar to an ARC. So let's go into what a little bit of that objectives and tasking is. So the next slide. So as promised, increase in safety is one of our main elements of consideration of our objective and tasking. We want to provide the safest training environment we can in this world. That's our number one goal. Obviously, that's through structured courses. Advancements in training delivery procedures can produce better pilots, better aeronautical decision making. How can we incorporate that and to reduce those GA fatal accident rates? We recognize that we could also do better at fostering and gathering and sharing of data between not only us, maybe the flight training industry. We want to, as I stated before, incorporate innovation and technology. We know there has been loads of training, not only just in aircraft, but also in learning techniques. What about competency-based training and assessment? Virtual and mixed reality simulations. Those are all things that haven't been utilized in the past. Well, they may still be utilized, but not as as prevalent in today's Part 141 regulatory structure. We need flexibility as we move through this. So that way, when things change again in the future, we're not having to rewrite again. We want to encourage innovation throughout this project. We want efficient and effective regulatory structure through this. We want to incentivize joining Part 141 community. Obviously, we showed you with the data previously that Part 61 is doing a majority of the pilot certification work. What are those barriers? We need your voice to tell us what's going on. We may have ideas, but obviously our ideas aren't what maybe is going on in the actual industry at the moment. So we need that from you. Explore maybe how Part 141s can maximize future pilot training demands. We know that there's a high demand for pilot training. We recognize, and I've even seen some of the comments going on, efficient and effective use of examining authority. We want to explore why Part 141 schools, there's not as many of them. Again, we have our ideas, but we want to also hear that directly from you. What we know may not be what you guys can provide us. Do we need to develop tools, resources to help assist pilot schools in applying for examining authority? We want to collect those recommendations. Maybe do we need additional training to help with those who are conducting examining authority? We recognize that there is a need to increase testing capacity and assist with DPE shortages. But let me be clear that we are not addressing DPEs. We are not covering Part 183, which is the regulations that cover DPEs. We are doing what we can under the regulatory structure of 141 to improve that side of the house. Data sharing. Could there be more collaboration between and mentoring for new pilot schools? What about sharing training methods and technology and data? We know data drives a lot of things and can help us make better decisions. Maybe that could even help with your friendly FAA FSDO and help reduce time and resources needed for them for surveillance and oversight. Maybe there's something we could be doing better in that aspect. One other item that you're going to find on our list is ICAO compliance. Obviously, we just went through an ICAO audit, and one of the things we recognized in that is we went to is the quality assurance system that is required by ICAO Annex 1, which is personnel licensing, Appendix 2, which is the training organizations, and Item 4 is specifically the quality assurance system. And we recognize that currently Part 141 does not have a quality assurance system within it, and it is required by ICAO. And again, rather than us just saying, yeah, let's create a reg, we want your input as to how should we implement that? So that way, again, we're not just implementing something on the industry that might be a burden. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to NFTA to kind of give a little bit more about how they are seeing the structure.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate that. Going forward here on our next series of slides, the first thing that we felt would be important to do would be to thank the entire FAA team who's been involved with us since last June in the production of what we're seeing here, not just today, but very quickly then pivoting into the in-person meetings around the country and our continued work on hybrid meetings and other opportunities to get together and work collaboratively. Thanking Mark Steinbecker, obviously one of the people with tremendous integrity that we enjoy working with always at FAA. A lot of our senior officials that we would have thanked today have either moved or gone on to other things, but Everett is still here, and Everett has been a part of this from the very beginning. He has been a very strong leader in bringing organizational clarity to what we want to do and focus. And certainly Trey has been very, very strong, and working with him for many, many months now, we feel very good that the team they have assembled, some of which you've heard from today, others you will continue to hear from across the process, a very strong team of FAA professionals from across the country who have done a fantastic job at maximizing their areas of subject matter expertise to get to you what you will need as industry participants to sort of bring this home. So let's talk a little bit about the current state of the industry. We've talked already about some of the history of 141, which everyone is quite familiar with. I made mention to it earlier in my comments that although there have been some revisions in recent years, and we would say the last 30 years, that the wholesale overlying ethos of the regulatory framework is well more than 40 years old, and in many cases more than that. It is long past time, and there is virtually no one in the industry or on Capitol Hill or at the FAA on the regulatory side of the house that would debate that particular point of view. And so it makes it very easy for all of us to come here because many of us have been waiting for this time for a long time. When asked by the former FAA administrator when he and I were in conference just about a year ago in April, what's the number one thing that we need to improve training? I said, absolutely, without hesitation, an updated 141 regulatory framework that embraces technology and incentivizes participation. As you heard Lindsay say earlier, only about 30% of flight training in this country is really getting looked at by our regulators. And that's probably not the kind of number we would want if we want to improve overall system safety top to bottom, not just within 141, but across the board. I think particularly those of you who came from military backgrounds would certainly agree, you fly like you train and you train like you're going to fly. And if we don't have the opportunity to bring oversight and standardization to an industry like ours, I don't think we'll ever really fully meet the mandates set ahead of us. Training, and if you trained during the era that I did, of course, a lot of times you went to the corner of a hangar with a door and a shingle and a desk and some guy that used to fly B-24s during World War II. And that's how you learned to fly. And it worked well, it worked fine in those days. But those days are long since passing us by. And that even so, the industry has never coalesced together in one place to bring all of their different interests and their different focuses of expertise where they could say, what should an industry look like now? And what should it look like for the foreseeable future so that we can do what we're asked to do and do it better and do it extremely well in all regards. Those on the outside, the general public at large, don't really know the underpinnings of all that we do in aviation and training, but they hear about all of the bad things that happen. And minimizing those things to the extent that we can is of paramount importance for sure. But how did we get here today? Well, ultimately, at the end of the last cycle in FAA reauthorization, it was clear language was in the bill mandating an update to Part 141. Many of you, through your lobbying efforts or other advocacy efforts, such that they are, and many of those efforts came from groups that weren't involved in flight training, which is to another point yet to come. But that loud colloquium ultimately got us to the point where we were going to have something coming out of this bill. And the FAA was able to say to Congress during the harmonization of both the Senate and House bills during conference that they had a better pathway forward. What we're doing now, they wanted to give an opportunity to see how well it would work so that mandated language was pulled out. But that's how we are here. And it's not to say that if for some reason this doesn't work or this doesn't meet the mark, that might not still happen, that the FAA would choose to come back in some other form of rulemaking later on down the road. But we got here and we're happy for it. But then why now with NFTA as your industry lead? We had been very, very active. We had been very, very vocal and very much working with FAA for the last 3 years with proposed solutions, proposed timelines, and the ways to affect this change quickly, bringing in the rest of the industry to have this conversation. As you heard me say earlier, the big tent approach is what our overall understanding of what we were trying to do was. It did not exist Those of you who've known me from other sectors in aviation know that I spent many, many years on the airline side of the world. And I was in a lot of these ARCs and working groups and task forces over those years. And there was always an empty chair at the table, and that was called the flight training chair because there was no one in it. When we built the 1,500-hour ATP new rule back in 2010 through 2012 to impart in 2015, it was a lot of airline people making decisions on the training industry and what they would need to do and how they would need to work forward. It was time for the training industry to have a voice and to have someone in the chair articulating with the rest of the stakeholders how everyone could work together to make this happen. And that's really what got us here to this point. We had the bandwidth and we had the expertise, and I'm not talking about just me, I'm talking about the folks that work with me, many members of our staff and leadership team who have said in various outlets and forms over the last few years, we can help facilitate this. By no means is it ours, nor do we think it is, nor do we seek to form an agenda. What we seek to provide is a safe, efficient manner for the conversation to be held, and for the conversation to be held constructively. The congressional mandate of 2010, when we came out, those of you who were working in the industry back then know we had two pretty consequential events in 2009. And so we had a bill called the Airline Safety Act in 2010. And one of the overriding quotes that was coming out over and over after that bill was passed was that the intent was to produce the finest aviators in the world as efficiently and wherever possible, reducing costs to prevent barriers to entry. As a side, they said, by the way, you're going to need more than you've ever needed in history on an unprecedented timeline. That laid before us a very difficult mandate. And I would say that industry has done a fairly good job. I think you've done a good job overall.
Hey, Jeff, do you want to maybe see if you can step in for Lee?
Sure, I can step in for Lee. I'm not sure what happened there, but basically what we're getting at is the fact that there has been this mandate, but we have been incredibly constrained by the regulatory scheme that's outdated and inherently inefficient. And our goal, since we started talking with the FAA, has been how can we remove pain points? And I'm seeing a lot of the comments come through related to the slowness of approving certificates and examining authority being underutilized. And these are all things and why we want the industry to be involved with this, because everyone in this conference is going to have a slightly different experience than that of myself or those that are currently on the board at NFTA. So the more people and the more insight from everyone's individual experiences, the better off we are going to be, and the more effective our mandate's going to be. So yes, in 2024, now, in addition to increasing efficiencies, the drive has been to work with the new technology that's coming out. And like we were talking about earlier, there's been a whole lot of technology change since this regulatory scheme was originally written. Even in the updates from 1997, the technology and the simulators and the virtual reality has dramatically changed and improved. And we look to see how we can embed these technologies into the certification, oversight, the students' experience, to allow us to do a better job and be more efficient with how we do things, and to remove those pain points that the FAA or the schools are currently experiencing. And I think that's what we're showing with the participation in 141, being very, very small compared to that of 61 because of the pain points and the certification processes, and it just being too cumbersome for someone to want to or incentivized to participate in. So the current state of the industry, like we talked about, flight training is the gateway to the industry. So we see it as something that, obviously we kind of lead the beginning of this charge to someone's career path. And if it's the airlines, then, but we need to set a standard in the beginning now because the overall system fails to reach its potential when flight training misses the mark. So if we can have a data-driven approach to ab initio and initial flight training, then we can see the changes that need to be made, and then have a regulatory scheme that will allow us to make these changes quickly to address the actual concerns and safety concerns. So our goal is to remove any unnecessary regulation while improving overall system safety.
Jeff, if I can jump back in there, I'm sorry. It looks like we had a technical glitch here on our end. I want to jump back to slide 29, if I could, please, Lauren. And yeah, I wanted to talk. So what changed recently? And this is what I think the rest of the industry is going to want to really pay close attention to, because there's an awful lot of discussion last summer by both the chairman of the T&I committee and many of the members of both T&I and Senate Commerce that they wanted us to now begin using efficiencies and technologies wherever possible as a mechanism to adhere to the earlier mandates. We say that out-of-date and ineffective regulatory schemes have hamstrung our efforts to meet these mandates because they do prohibit embracing new technologies at present, and there are some political conversations around that will need to be once again enjoined. The new technology, however, will allow us to do a better job and allow it to do it more efficiently. I don't use the term efficiency to say, well, we're trying to make it convenient on companies, when I'm actually saying we're trying to be more efficient in student outcomes, in student performance, and in students' ability to progress through the different ratings and syllabi, whether they're in a four-year institution or in an ab initio program. Increasing safety, reducing costs, and improving outcomes, again, are a theme you're going to hear so much more about in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. Slide 30. Yes, flight training is the gateway to the industry. If we don't get it right here, generally it doesn't get right again for a while. We don't have these opportunities like we're having now often. Overall system safety will sometimes fail to reach its potential when flight training misses the mark, right? We fly the way we train. I always loved that old saying that came from the military many years ago, that very rarely will a pilot rise to the occasion, but he or she will always sink to the level of their training. It is incumbent upon us at this level to get it right. And to do so, we have to have the tools, the right tools in the toolbox. One of the most important points that I hear being stated by you all when we're talking over the last 6 months or so, I kept this quote in here because I heard it from many of you all so many times. Without a robust, fully functioning, and efficient flight training system, we cannot reach the objectives given to us by Congress, the FAA, and the industry. And I think that is a point to be remembered, maybe even placed into your notebooks for thought about going forward. Where we are able to remove unnecessary regulations while improving system safety, I think that goes well to what this administration is telling us is a must-meet metric for this to be successful. Next slide, please. By harnessing the collective expertise and knowledge of the entire industry, all of you out there, because you all bring very good stuff, this is why we were founded as an organization. So we feel very much at home at saying, let's have a conversation. And Jeff is going to talk more about that here in a few more slides as to how we intend to do that. We will be successful, most successful, when we set aside our personal and political agendas, when we work with one goal in mind, which is to produce a better industry for everyone. It again goes back to my long hold quote that I can't take credit for originating, but I use it often, that a rising tide gathers all boats. If we do a good job to build a great industry, individual organizations, etc., will also reap the benefit of that. We have to know that if you come to this process with an open mind and you have not already formulated what your position is by the time this first meeting started today or the next meeting starts in April, you may get a chance to hear some things and see opportunities that you maybe didn't recognize before because your organization wasn't a part of whatever research was being done or whatever data was being collected. Next slide, please. I like to say in my organizational design work, which has been over the course of many years, the most successful model we can use in trying to revision a project or even an organization, that if money and resources were unlimited or no object, what would you do? In other words, the purpose of this modernization effort is to dream and dream big. Do you want to just amend 141 as it's written in the framework it already sits? Or do you want to start with something completely different that you know meets the mark for succeeding generations to come and will be a big, big move for all of us? I tell people that if money and resources were no object, tell me what you do, because generally money and resources will follow a very good idea. They have a way of sniffing that out and making it happen. So I challenge each of you who are here today, who are going to be part of the process, and I encourage you to be part of the process all the way through. Don't cherry pick this. Be part of all of the meetings, end to end, in a systematic way. But I challenge you to dream big and say, what would we do if we can do anything? Because the FAA is in this listening mode now to say, industry, tell us what would work best. And if what you tell us that will work best will also improve safety, improve accident rates, produce better pilots with better efficiency and throughput to the airlines and other end users, I promise you they're going to buy it. I can give you my word on that. I want to turn it over to Jeff now for some conversation regarding what we're going to be doing between meetings to harness your collective ideas and voices.
Thank you, Lee. So yes, defining success. What is the goal of this entire task force? And really, our goal is to create a regulatory framework that ensures the industry will be successful in meeting the congressional and industry needs and expectations. We want to remove the pain points that everyone's experiencing with 141, incentivize participation to enhance the safety, and create a regulatory framework that is so robust, trusted, and respected as to negate the need for any superseding accreditations, validation by government, industry, or otherwise. Our goal is to have the 141 be the gold standard in pilot training certification. And so I think we're going to be doing this, and like Lee was saying, there's going to be quite a few meetings that will go on in between the actual scheduled planned ones, because there's a lot of work to do. And I think that what we plan on having is during those meetings, gathering a lot of information, hearing the pain points, creating this conversation to address the slowness around changes, why some of the largest schools in the country operate as Part 61, and what is preventing them from wanting to be a 141 school. And a lot of people are already commenting about the lack of FA resources and POIs, and I think some of it is going to go down to how the schools themselves are managed and managed more efficiently through the utilization of technology, electronic record keeping, that would allow the FAA the bandwidth to incentivize more participation in FAA 141. And then the goal at the end of this entire thing is to present to the FAA a report that would be potentially the new regulatory scheme, as close to regulatory text as possible, to again, make it very easy for adaptation at the end by the FAA. So next slide, please. We envision that after today, we'd be dividing up into a few different working groups that will be, working offline in between meetings. And really, I see there being at least three main groups. The certification, the process involved with certification, the time it takes, how it happens, all the tools and tech around it. The current oversight model, the pain points there, and how a more efficient method of oversight and management of schools could be conducted. And then if we are more efficient with the resources of the FAA, then that will allow the FAA to allow more self-examining authority and things that are being claimed now as not having enough resources. If we're more efficient with the resources we have, we feel that we can then, again, service the schools better. And then lastly, we're going to look at the operations. And the operations, I kind of put everything else into operations, whether that's course requirements, how the school must operate, the requirements around them, to do their job and to be actually a 141 school. So I'm sure that others will show up, and that's kind of why I left that fourth bullet there. But and that's why I think these discussions with everyone in this room will have to happen to see if I'm missing anything or what else we need to address during this working group. But the way I look at it is we have 3/4 of the year to a year to produce a really great and regulatory scheme that could help bring us into the current, and then future flight training industry. So we're going to work between sessions. And I think that these offline meetings could be done either virtually or in person, similar to what we're doing. But a lot of it would be then to communicate directly to NFTA. I would highly recommend that you guys send us an email with your area of expertise, what you think would be your perfect world group that you could, like I think I would be great for certification, or I think I'd be great for the overall management of a certificate. Whatever you think your expertise is, if you want to be in all three of them, that's great as well. But I think that the goal would be to divide and conquer what these regulatory schemes look like in the long run. There will be more contact information for us at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, the end of this meeting, that will give our website and this email again. But reach out to us directly, and then I obviously look forward to having the chance to meet everyone in Atlanta for our first in-person meeting. So thank you.
I want to give us a chance to take a break because I know we're kind of going at an hour. But what I would like to do is we do see a whole bunch of questions in the question and answer, and some of them are being answered as they can be throughout. We have a GART 141 team. They're in the background typing like crazy. So, but I will say is a lot of the questions are like very detailed, and these are the things that we want you to bring to our meetings as we go forward. So you all bring a lot of good points. I think a lot of the pain points and things that that Jeff was presenting. So again, we'll answer what we can here, but right now, just keep in mind this is more informational, of getting you like information about the project itself, and maybe expand on that a little bit, Everett, if you'd like.
No, that's exactly right. So this is this first meeting is exactly that, to just kind of present just kind of the overall project in the framework. And of course, as we get further down the road, as we heard from NFTA, there's certainly opportunities to kind of drill down further into details. So today is just kind of outlining what the overall project looks like, get into some of the logistics, and then and answer your questions there, or take some questions down, maybe some things we haven't considered that we do need to consider. So so keep the questions coming, and appreciate our team working in background to answer as many as possible.
And I will present as to how you can submit stuff to the docket later on. So that'll come. So if you do have good ideas, and I do see a lot of good ideas or questions, by all means, those are the kind of things that we would like on our federal docket. So we will be presenting that in a little while. But Lauren, if you could put us on a maybe about 10-minute break.
Yep, not a problem. We'll meet back here in 10 minutes at about 11:16.
All right, I see 9:16 on the clock. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Lauren, if you could just give me a thumbs up that I'm good. All right, so we did get a lot of good questions. If you want to go ahead and go back to the last slide, Brandon, for just a second. No, right, actually go ahead and go back one more. Somebody had asked for the email address there for NFTA, so I'll leave that up for a split second while I'm talking. There was a lot of good questions about about, where is this going? And we're going to get to those kind of questions hopefully by the end. So, what's the end goal of this? So that's going to come at the very end. So hopefully we answer those questions. Another one was, how does ODA, or organization designation authorization, hopefully Melanie, I'm doing it justice, she's online. One thing is I'm actually on that team as well. So I am coordinating with that team, but that effort is under Part 183, and those are two separate entities. So I will be working with them, and that group is definitely here listening to this as well. So they are going to watch and see if there's any efficiencies that we can, make it work for both sides of those houses. Everett, do you see anything else that you want to address as well? And you can go back to the questions slide, Brandon.
Nope. Nothing at this time, Lindsay. I think like you said, I think we're gonna cross a lot of these bridges as we continue. If there's, but feel free to highlight for me if there's something that I should answer now. I'd be happy to.
And I'm going to be talking about the Atlanta meeting here shortly. So I will get to those kind of questions as well. So we're going to dive into the schedule and how it looks, is where we're headed next. So if we don't have anything further that I can see at the moment, I'm going to continue on. And again, and if we don't answer your questions right now, by all means, we are going to be answering them, or we'll take them as an IOU and we will answer them at some point. So by all means, don't, just because if you don't see an answer right now, please don't feel like you're not being heard or seen. There's still over 300 people here, so that's great. So next I'm going to dive into is the schedule, is how this kind of works. So you can see here, this is just kind of a big high level picture of the schedule. And on the left-hand side, you can see when we first put out that first Federal Register notice back almost a couple days just right after Christmas for this particular meeting. Each one of these meetings is going to have an individual Federal Register notice out for it specifically. So that way, we're kind of making sure that there's no changes in schedule. If you go to our website, at the bottom of it, or kind of about midway down, there's a link that says tentative schedule. If you actually click on that, that'll give you this whole overview of the schedule itself. But I'm going to go over it step by step right now as well. So you can see from the beginning to the end, we're going to go all the way till about the end. I think it's the first week of December is where we're going to be our last meeting in El Segundo. And then the ideology is we take that first part of the year to wrap up all the findings, and the findings report would be, or the recommendation report would be submitted somewhere about the beginning of next year. So this is not just, we're not just here today. We're not coming out here to vet everything out today. We're just letting you know how the project is going to go. There is a lot of time for us to dig into all these items, especially all these great items that you guys are putting in the Q&As. They are great, and we're going to be addressing these throughout the project. So again, you're going to have plenty of time to vet anything out or questions or things that we want to talk about. That's what this is for. So actually go back just for a quick second, Brandon. So you're going to see that's the whole project. If you have any questions, just generally, we will be answering them in the next few slides. Actually, you're right, Brandon. Let's go. So how did we pick these locations? We actually graphed out where all the Part 141 schools are. You can see that a majority of them are in the southern part of the United States and up kind of along the coastlines of each side. So we picked one, like I said, in Atlanta. Atlanta was mainly chosen just because of the federal facilities that we could use. At the regional office, it was close to Florida. And then we chose Texas, California, and also New England area. That's the reasoning for the locations. So let's move on to the next slide. So our first location, you can go and put it all up there, Brandon. Our first location is in Atlanta, Georgia at the FAA Southern Regional Office, and it's hybrid. So, and I'll explain here in the next slide kind of how many people can attend and all that as well. So April 1st through 3rd, and I know some of you have said, I saw that Sun and Fun. Yeah, we can't unfortunately change it at this point. But again, even if you can't attend in person, there is a virtual option. So I know like if you had conflicts of schedule, hopefully maybe if you can't attend one way, you can attend another. basically, it's a hybrid meeting. It's going to be the primary subjects for that meeting are going to be Part 141 certification. So all those that you were worried about, hey, we're worried about how long it takes for certification. Can 61 providers come into Part 141? Are we wanting their feedback? Yes, we do want their feedback. And yes, we want the feedback of everybody, whether it's the aircraft manufacturers or whether it's, the even 121, they can come. Anybody's welcome to attend. But again, with the premise of that we are talking about Part 141 certification. Certificate management. So how your certificate is managed by the local FSDO. This is your chance to talk. And yes, we understand that there's a lot of pain points there. Examining authority. So we're hitting a lot of those really heavy items right at the beginning because we know those are important. And we're going to allow for extra time. You're going to see here in a little bit as to even if we recognize 3 days is probably not enough for what we need. I have up here is the in-person registration and the virtual registration. I have heard that we might be already sold out on that 100 attendees for the in-person registration. And one thing to note on both of these registrations, I'll have to verify, is that if you see that you can answer, you can attend 3 days, click on all 3 days. So that way you get to see each day. Each day is not just the same repeat, it is a continuation of the topic. So it's not going to be a repeat of just one day after the next. It is a continuation of topics for 3 days. So keep in mind, if you are attending in person, you do have to register by March 17th. Again, if we're already sold out, that may not be an issue. When you register, please make sure your registration, whatever your name you put in there, matches your government ID. We are using that list because you will be attending a federal facility. So we will submit that information to security to get you on site. There will be no walk up, just being able to walk up and walk into that meeting because of the security information. If you are attending on our website, we have visitor information. This is, again, the registration QR code. Go back to our website and there is some visitor information there that you will need to be mindful of. If you are not a US citizen, also there is an extra step that you will need to do. It's also on the visitor information. So please be mindful of all that because if you're not following some of that stuff, you may not be allowed into the secure area. Again, a virtual registration will be there. So we have 300 people here. So definitely you will be able to attend. We'll be talking via a virtual means to everybody online as well. So we recognize, let's go to the next slide. We recognize that 3 days, that's a lot of content that we might be going to cover even in 3 days. So the way these meetings are structured is there's going to be a primary and a secondary. The secondary is kind of twofold. Maybe there'll be, after the first meeting, maybe you'll want to go back and see if you can collect certain studies, reports, data, whatever that happens to be. Or maybe you just want to go back and talk, and maybe you guys have with an FDA, maybe they'll have some different meetings on the side. So it's time to let you regroup, come back, and also maybe we have some follow-up items, or maybe you weren't able to attend the first one, but you can at least attend the second one. So every meeting is going to have 2, a primary and a secondary, and it's going to cover those same topics. So you're going to see that same cadence as we go. The next meeting, and really quick too, is the April and today's meeting. Obviously, they have registration and they're all in the Federal Register. This meeting right here in May has not been put in the Federal Register yet. It will be. So once you see the meeting in the Federal Register, that's when you know it's firm. But again, if there were any changes, please, please, please look at our website because that's where we're going to announce if there were any changes. Let's go on. So the next meeting that's going to have the next main topic is June 10th through 12th. And again, if you have that tentative meeting schedule up on your computer screens, you're going to see all of these and it'll have all the same information. It's again a hybrid. Each one of these that are in person, they're all going to be limited to 100 people and it's going to be first come, first serve. We ask that if you can, send one person from your organization so that way there's room for others that if they want to attend in person. Again, this will be hybrid. It'll be at the New England regional office, which is Burlington, Massachusetts. Just making sure everybody knows, because there's lots of Burlingtons out there. And I just want to make sure you're at the right location. Again, we will have all that information about registration and links and all that stuff once we get that published. This meeting's primary topic is safety. So we're going to look at safety and risk mitigation, reduction in accidents, things that we could do there. And then we're going to hit that item of the quality assurance system as defined by ICAO. That being said, we'll have the secondary meeting as well in July, and that one's completely virtual, and it'll be on the exact same topics. The next meeting, we are taking a little bit of break. We recognize in the summer, towards the end, obviously right after July, we got EA, our adventure, right? And then we have a few other things like colleges trying to get back to school. So we wanted to be mindful of that. And so we are taking a little bit of a break. That'll also give some time in there. So if there's industry meetings that want to happen on the outside, that's great. We encourage that. But the next one will be in October 7th through 9th, and that'll be in Fort Worth, Texas at the Southern Regional Office. And the primary topic there is going to be technology, emerging technology, aircraft, simulation, electronic flight bags. It could be those various learning and examination methods. What are we not considering? So that again will be the hybrid. It'll be 100 people in person and the virtual. And then again, the following secondary meeting to follow up, and that'll be November 4th through 6th, and the same topics. The last meeting will be in El Segundo, California, which is near LA. Actually, I think it's right close to the LAX airport, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll be at the Western Pacific Regional Office. This is going to be our closing meeting, and that's where we're going to finalize all the information and hopefully have a pretty good outline of the recommendations from the whole project as a whole. And those recommendations can be a lot of different things. Like I saw somebody ask, what is it that we're going to be recommending? And I'll let Everett kind of wrap that up in his closing statement. But that is the schedule. Last thing I want to talk about is the federal docket. So a lot of you guys are putting out some really great information. And I know some people have already utilized the federal docket that we have. So if you go to our federal registered notice on there, it'll explain where you can go to regulations.gov. If you go there, you can, and we'll put a link to it in the chat here shortly, because Audrey is going to be coming up next and she's going to explain how to use the federal docket. But in there, that's where we want you to put some of this information that you're citing. Or maybe after we went through these subjects and things today and you're like, hey, you guys didn't consider this. This would be also a good place to put that. So things that are helpful is valid data and reports, unique discussion topics. Maybe, like I said, we didn't cover something today and you feel like, hey, you guys are missing the mark on this. Please let us know. Feedback specifics to modernizing Part 141. Please be mindful that all comments really need to pertain to Part 141. Again, yes, there's going to be other influences from other pieces, from whether it's 121, 135, and that kind of stuff that we might influence going forward. But again, that's our framework in which we can work with. So I'm going to pause for a quick second. Does anybody, and I'm trying to look at the questions. Just looking, sorry, going through. Do we have anything specific to like the schedule or questions that way? And again, I will have to throw an IOU about the if we're already full on the registration for Atlanta, we might be. So it's unfortunately, well, not fortunately, unfortunately, that's great because then we've got a lot of people who are interested. But also, keep in mind that even if you didn't get in on this first one, you could attend virtually. And there's other ones that will be available that people can attend in person. So I'm really excited the fact that people are very interested in this. So that's wonderful. Just trying to see. And if not, I'm going to turn it over to Audrey. And then Audrey will turn it over to Everett from there for kind of some closing out statements. So we probably we'll only have about maybe 2 hours in this, maybe a little bit more, but we also left a lot of time for questions as well. So I'm not seeing any specific questions that need to come up unless the group wants to point me to anything. Other than that, Audrey, I'm going to turn it over to you to explain how to use the docket.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. As Lindsay mentioned, we're looking for your input, your ideas, and the docket is the best way to do that. So the first thing that we will do is that docket link will be sent in the chat and also available online, as Lindsay explained. So once you are on that docket website, you will see the docket documents tab. From there, you'll be able to click whichever document you would like to put a comment on and select comment. At this point, it'll open up a text box for you to type your comment or copy and paste into it. Then it will ask for the category of comment. Then it should give you an option to upload files. If you have any data, any images, documents, things like that, that would be the place to put them. Then there's a spot to provide your email address, and then you will select an identity. So there will be 3 options at that point. The first one will be an individual. This will ask for your first and last name, and then if you would like to provide your location and phone number, it will be also there. If you are submitting on behalf of an organization, it will ask for the name and type of organization. And then lastly, if you do not wish to submit any of that personal information, there is an option to submit anonymously. If you submit anonymously, there will be no personal information linked with your comment. However, that does mean that we will be unable to contact you for any follow-up, any questions, clarifications. So if possible, we strongly recommend utilizing those first 2 options if you can. From there, you will have the chance to review the terms of participation and privacy notice and then hit submit. If you have any questions about this process, the Q&A is probably the best way to get those asked, and we will get back to you on that. And from there, I think we're sending it back over to Everett and Lee for wrapping up. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I really appreciate that. And just kind of to tag on a little bit with respect to the posting to the docket, because I'm sure that there may be some questions there as well. So with respect to our project here, in my earlier statements about this not being an ARAC or an ARC, that also follows with respect to posting information to the Federal Register. So a couple of things to consider there. You may want to post things to the Federal Register if they would like to be fully inspected and by those who are participating. Remember, we're going to have participants come and go through the various meetings, so making sure the information is out there and accessible to those that want to inspect that information. For example, data that may either support your position on certain things, then that may want to be posted to the docket. Additionally, down the road, if this ends up in a rulemaking project, one of the requirements to consider, and I'm no rulemaking expert, but just from my years of experience, is that having information posted to the docket for the public to view lends to being able for the FAA to be able to include that information for consideration when rulemaking comes. So keep that in mind when it comes to anonymous entries. I think that would preclude those anonymous entries being not considered for future rulemaking. That doesn't mean that information can't be put up anonymously, it can. Or if you want to point anonymously to sources that are out there, and of course those sources may not be anonymous. It could be a report, it could be data, it could be something else. Those data and reports could be considered. So I hope that helps a little bit. And if there's any more questions around that, then we can certainly get those answers for you through our Office of Rulemaking or the Office of General Counsel here at the FAA. All right. Thanks again, Audrey. Really appreciate that. And I think we'll go ahead and take some general questions. Lee, if you could join me, then we can tag team here on a couple of questions. And I'll get started with a couple of things with respect to questions. I believe there were some questions out there that they're telling me were related to the deregulatory environment that we're in under the administration. So this deregulatory environment is it's not new for us in the sense that we were under a similar environment under the first Trump administration. So our Office of Rulemaking, our executives, our processes already are in place, and I believe even DOT and there's some other statutory requirements out there that that have to speak to deregulatory efforts and identifying regulations that that are deregulatory or are going to be removed. And then additionally, within the FAA, there's already processes underway to identify regulations that are, let's say, candidates for removal in the 10-to-1. The other thing I want to emphasize too is that our effort here is, I think it's well suited for the environment in that what we are doing is not envisioned to be a regulation that industry hopefully would not see as burdensome at the end. It'd be quite the contrary. It'd be lead to more efficiency, and those efforts, the more it's supported by industry, including through this effort, then the chances of that rulemaking project moving forward is the chances are greater. Do you see that the same, Lee?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Perfect. So yeah, so we're going to work within those processes for sure. And I just think that the fact that we're able to kick this project off bodes well for the future of this project. So, Lindsay, any other questions out there that are candidates for answering at this point?
I'm just kind of scoping through just to see.
I've noticed a consistent theme here over the last few minutes. A lot of folks who would like to come to Atlanta have obviously found out that it is closed at this time. They were wondering about an alternate list in case people cancel. Other people have said day one is full, but there's openings on day 2 or 3. That presupposes people will come for the first day, but not all 3, which seems a little counterintuitive. So I would say at least a good third of the messages over the last hour have been simply about the Atlanta meeting and space requirements.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look at what the registration is and kind of dissect it a little bit before I can provide some information, but we will definitely put some more information on either to those participants or also to on the website.
I think just the website overall would be good.
So, because again, that just kind of happened probably more so overnight that we had that registration fill up. I mean, that was literally yesterday. I think I had 3, and now it's full. So it was an overnight issue of getting that full. So we will definitely take note of that. As to increasing, if we can increase slots, that might not be available at this time, but we'll have to take a look at things. So
the other thing I noticed for the group, there were quite a few clarifications asking about volunteering to be on a working group or that type of thing, an interest group between the scheduled meetings, which Jeff spoke to earlier. So to reiterate, if that is your desire, if you want to either, volunteer to chair a particular interest group or participate on that group or some other level of participation, all you need to do is just send along your name, the area of interest, and what you've got in mind to the web address we put up earlier, which will be coming up later in one of the very final slides. You'll see that web address again. Drop a line. There it is right there. 141 Task Force at nftaus.org. The QR code there will take you directly to the website, which also has a link there. But if you just write down that email address that you're all the way home, you let us know. We're going to compile those lists. We're going to talk to the people who have already stepped forward and asked to have a leadership role. We made it a rule within our organization that all of the leadership roles for these particular working groups or task groups would be from external groups, so that there would be no fear that we were sort of, putting our arms around the entire thing and not letting anybody participate, because it's antithetical to who we are. So just let us know. The last thing I'll say about this is that I hope that all of you, and I know that all of you can't, but to the greatest extent that most of you can participate in each and every meeting, that kind of continuity and that kind of involvement, I think will evolve a process over time that by the time we get to late next fall, we may be in areas we couldn't even begin to think of today. There are a lot of folks out there doing cutting edge research. There are a lot of operational folks out there that have got some amazing ideas. The folks working around the SMS and AQP world have got some tremendous ideas. And of course, our advanced technology folks. We've got a lot of talking to do. We've got a lot of listening to do. And I would hope that everyone has an open mind at this point and just a blank canvas to begin working from.
Yep. Thank you, Lee. I think one of the other questions that have come in is, does the FAA delete erroneous comments on the docket? And in noise abatement efforts it was one of the examples given. So, so we're going to certainly be looking at the comments that are out there. We're not required to respond to each comment. However, I think it would be appropriate to let folks know if they're commenting on certain things or trying to post information that they think we'll consider, but it's out of scope, then we will respond with some indication that it's out of scope. So, Lindsay, I know you've been doing a little bit of touch base with respect to the noise issues and that have come up, and I don't think you've touched on that yet, but maybe highlighting that for folks and that we've shared that with the appropriate organizations.
Yeah, we did talk to the Office of, I believe it's Environmental and Energy. So we did talk to them about those particular issues. We're working with them. They do have an area that's where those are more appropriate with them. They talked about things that, aircraft manufacturers and things do to help with noise abatement. Obviously, if you're having a particular issue, like I see one person posting a particular issue over an area, that unfortunately does need to go to a local FSDO or to the noise abatement office, depending on if it's what kind of issue it is, whether it's congestion, safety, or whether it's noise. They all have different places where those need to go. For us under Part 141, that's not what we're here for today, but again, not that we're not listening, and we want to make sure we get you pointed in the correct direction.
Right. And more pointedly, that would just be out of scope for what we're doing here. So,
right.
But as Lindsay said, if there's any questions about getting you connected with the right organizations and folks, we certainly can help with that.
Lindsay, I might offer one additional idea here, and I'm cruising back through some of the questions. Maybe opening up the registration for the meetings later in the year as soon as possible, and people can go ahead and start making arrangements to be there. And we'll also need to know then if we would need a larger venue potentially at some of those other cities.
Yeah, and I will kind of caveat, we are learning as we go, right? We didn't know what participation was going to be. We did, because unfortunately there's not like a roadmap as ever explained for this process. So there, I will say, please grow with our learning pains a little bit. So we will be meeting right back up on Monday to discuss a lot of all this information so we can try to hack and make this the best piece of public meetings going forward. So grow with us a little bit. That's all I'm asking, a little bit of patience in that aspect. So that way we can adjust as we need to. We'll pivot and adjust as we go.
Yeah, thanks for that. And and you already hit on one of the points I wanted to make as well. And I know Lee has touched on it, but yeah, I mean, we're clearly in unique times as an agency. So I will foot stomp that as well, just to please, and we've been sharing this within our teams as well, is just maintain maximum flexibility. We'll do everything we can to front load and get information out as early as possible. But we also have certain requirements internally that we have to go through in order to get approvals for next steps, et cetera, each piece. So max flexibility, max patience is requested. So thank you for that. Any other questions showing up highlighted that we should get to?
I know we have a few open, but again, sometimes when we left open because we are going to respond to them, but it might take us a little bit to get through some of them. They may be a little bit more pinpointed to something, but
okay.
We will definitely. Okay. I think we're pretty well good to wrap up.
Here's one for you. I'll throw you a juicy one, Everett, or you yourself, Lindsay.
Wait, I didn't ask for any juicy ones.
Last question here is any specific areas that the ICAO audit has indicated are needed will be addressed by this initiative? That's a very good question.
Do you want me to address
Yeah,
that?
Go ahead, Lindsay. I think you already touched on that to a degree.
Right. And so the specific to training organizations, the one thing that we noticed was specific and we got pointed out was that quality assurance system. That was the main item that came out of that audit was, hey, we don't have that within our regulatory framework and we need to get that into our regulatory framework. So that was literally the only thing. There were a few other things that we might have identified, which I will definitely be briefing in June when we get to that piece of safety. But they are very minor. But I would definitely highly encourage you to go read that. I think it's Annex 1, Appendix 2. You can read it for yourselves and read what the requirements are. So it's definitely nothing that's secret. It's all out there for everybody to view as to what the requirements are. We just want your input as to how to implement that. So that way, again, we're not creating a burdensome system for you. So that's a very good question and actually fairly easy to answer.
So in terms of wrap up, Lee, I'll go ahead and start if that's okay. And then you can, give some final words as well. So I'll end where I started, which is with a tremendous thanks to all of you for registering and showing up today for this meeting. The interest has been evident. The support from industry that we've heard through our leadership has been resounding. So please continue to make it known, outside of the halls of the FAA, that that support for this initiative is strong. I'd like to thank our team, our Part 141 team, that did a lot of the legwork to put this together and still have a lot of work to do with the hybrid meetings going ahead. I already touched on one of the points I wanted to hit, which was to maintain that maximum flexibility in patients. But the other thing, and Lee, I think you touched on this as well, which was, hey, I think that there's going to be a lot of strong voices, organizations, opinions through this process. And I think that if we all focus on the end result and that we all share similar, if not exactly the same interests, then we can all come to a point where at the end, it doesn't mean there's going to be 100% agreement. There may be some dissenting voices. That's absolutely fine. We'd like those as well. But we really think that if we focus on interests and not positions, then we're really going to have a strong outcome, from this project. Is this another question that might be out there? Is this a whiteboard approach? I would not say that it's not. I think it needs to be the appropriate approach. But again, from an FAA perspective, we're not trying to funnel a particular outcome like industry to look at everything from a whole with NFTA leading and being able to shepherd, coordinate, and facilitate the conversation. So I don't want you to think at all that the FAA is trying to drive to a particular income. I wanted to make sure that I underscored that point as well. But Lee, I think I would also be remiss if I didn't say thank you to you and your organization for stepping up to the plate to play an important role here. I know that as you've said, you are committed to making sure that all of our participants across the industry spectrum have an opportunity to voice their interests in the outcome here. So thank you very much to you and to Jeff and to your entire team. So over to you, Lee.
Thank you very much, Everett. And again, a great debt of thanks to our friends at the FAA who have spent a lot of time over the last year or more to make today happen. Of course, our involvement had been off and on for maybe a year and a half, 2 years, but certainly in earnest since last June. And it's been a long, fast few months, but here we are. To echo some of the earlier comments, both in questions and otherwise, remember, we're just now beginning the process. So some of you may have some ideas about framework. Some of you have some ideas about where this should go. And that's good that we have those initial notes sort of codified. But I would also ask you to bring those with an open mind because we're not quite sure how the industry is going to respond here and just exactly what else we will hear in the coming months that might allow us to dream and dream big. Again, we are the big tent that allows all folks in training and the training tangential organizations to come and sit and talk and have conversation and work together wherever possibly and work together collaboratively at all times to advance the industry. And again, why is it important to advance the industry? Because it improves system safety. It improves student outcomes. And it improves our ability to meet the mandate to produce the finest, safest pilots in the world. And I think that's something we should all be proud of. I'm looking forward to working with so many of you coming up. I can't even begin to count the number of meetings or lunches, dinners I've had with so many of you and reps from your organization just since last fall through now. But it's been many, more than we want to count. But it is nice to know that in all of those meetings, we were hearing very similar things from virtually all of the organizational groups with slight variations. But to Everett's point earlier, if we focus on that end goal, everyone does win. Everyone will share in that success. And we could rightfully say to ourselves when it's all over with, we worked together to change aviation for generations to come. And that would not necessarily be a bad thing to be able to have on your CV, right? So I look forward to hearing from you all. We're going to pull together these lists of working group, interest groups, task groups, whatever they happen to be. We'll collate all of these emails. Believe it or not, we've received over 60 just during this meeting alone. And we'll continue to look at those and be back in touch with you very soon. Thank you for participating today, and I'll toss it back to the group.
Appreciate everybody and look forward to working with everybody. And I think we can start closing the meeting out. We'll be here sitting here for a little bit. But other than that, thank you again. Really
thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.